and welcome to this evening's edition of Politics 101. This evening, we are going to be talking to a number of persons about three protest events that took place over the last couple of days. I'm talking, of course, about the anti PPP march and rally in Brooklyn, New York, and the picketing exercise in Buxton, held also on Sunday, and of course the ongoing protest activities by the minibus operators. I have with me tonight representatives of the organizers of those events, and we are going to be talking about the events, what happened, what were the demands, what have been the outcomes, what are the takeaways from those events, and hear from the organizers what they have in mind going forward. Let me just say good evening to everyone who's joining and to urge you to share the link so that others know that this program is on. Of course, the protest activities mark the beginning of a new season of protests after almost 1 year of relatively little activity against the overreach of the present government. And it seems as though those on the other side are finding their feet. I want to start with Mr. The president of the Guyana Minibus Union, and that's Mr. Ian Andrews. And then later on, we're going to have representatives from the Buxton event, and then Rickford Burke and Aubrey Norton are going to be speaking about the event in Brooklyn. Mr. Andrews, Ian Andrews. Is Mr. Andrews there? Ian Andrews, who's the president of the Minibus Union. As you know, the president and his government gave ultimatum to the minibus operators, asking them to ensure that they are vaccinated, or else they would not be allowed to drive their minibuses and to work. You know, the vaccine issue has been quite controversial, very controversial. We start off here on this program with the acknowledgement that there is a pandemic, that the COVID-19 pandemic is real. There, of course, is a lot of propaganda out there to the contrary, but it's real. It has claimed the lives of millions of people. In our small Guyana, it has claimed a lot of lives, and so the pandemic is real. But we're talking about a pandemic in a divided society, within the context of people being skeptical about the vaccine. And that presents a problem because if you're fighting a pandemic, you need all hands on deck, you need unity, you need the country to be together to fight the pandemic. But our country is divided, and that presents difficulties. And the divisions in our society have found their way in this whole issue of the vaccine, and that in itself becomes a problem. So from my estimation, we have two problems in Guyana. We have the problem of the pandemic, and then we have the problem of a divided society facing a pandemic. And that in itself is a crisis, as we have noticed here in Guyana. Is Mr. Andrews ready?
Yes, sir.
Yes, good afternoon, Mr. Andrews, and welcome to Politics 101. The Minibus, is it the Minibus Association or the Minibus Union?
It's a Minibus Union.
Minibus Union. Mr. Andrews, you've been quite active in that organization for a long time, and the Minibus Union has been staging some protests over the last 2 weeks or so. Bring us up to date. Tell us what prompted the protests and what the protests are about.
Thanks for having me here, Dr. Hines. And you would have said something earlier about the division that we have in politics and all this kind of thing. Now, we have checked out what it is about when you have an administration or a group of persons, some task force, who just come up with decisions that they would bring out on Friday, and then you see you have to comply on Monday and all this kind of thing. The union has been doing a lot of research as regards to this COVID-19, and we recognize that there's not enough information that is being given to this population. And as you said before, there are a section of this population who, even though they're members of the union, would not want to hear any explanations or more information. They just run blindly and take these vaccines. But then there are those who do not. And we have checked the the Nuremberg Code and the Helsinki Declaration, and it clearly states, among other things, that there is no government, organization, or human being can tell another human being what he must put into his body. You must have a choice. That's what we're saying. We are not confident about this vaccine. At least the union and I in person who would have checked, I don't even know if that is a vaccine. There's a lot behind this.
All right, Mr. Andrews, let's hold on. You started off by saying that some people went blindly and took the vaccine. I am one of those persons who took the vaccine. I didn't do so blindly. You know, let's be cognizant that we have in our population, in our unions, in our households, 3 groups of people as it relates to the vaccine. Some people will never take the vaccine. Some people will take it under certain conditions once they have the information and they're convinced that is the right. And then there are some people who have already done their research and decided they will take it. So we have 3 groups of people. And I have been saying to people, let us not allow a vaccine to divide us. You know, let us not. You are the head of a union that includes all 3 groups. Those who will not take it, those who will take it under condition, those who have already taken it. And your responsibility is to represent all of them.
Yes, we do.
So don't say that they took it blindly. Anyhow, what are you protesting? Are you protesting is Mr. Andrews on there? Is Mr. Andrews on? Okay. Are you protesting the high-handedness of the government? Because it seems to me that all of us are agreed on that. We are agreed that this government has mismanaged the COVID-19, the vaccine thing. And you can't come to people who are making a living using their minibuses to come to them today and tell them, look, tomorrow, unless you got this thing, this vaccine, you can't run your minibus. That is wrong. That is wrong. And I'm saying that as a person who's taking the vaccine. So the issue for me here is not the vaccine, it's the way in which the government is using the vaccine in order to bully people in the nation. Do you agree with me on that?
That is the point I'm trying to make, sir. The high-handedness
Right. Let's stick to
Uh,
that.
the
Yeah.
high-handedness, which creates an atmosphere of fear.
Yes.
And we've seen that fear and high-handedness in that Jim Jones thing where people went to their death because they put you in a position where you don't have a choice diplomatically, because you're working. You can't come to work if you don't take this vaccine. You cannot drive if you do not take this vaccine. That means you haven't given us a choice. It's
All right.
high-handedness.
All right. Some people don't want a choice, right? Some people have already taken the vaccine. Let's stick to the high-handedness of the government.
Mhm.
What are you demanding of the government? Because remember, you are representing people who have people who've taken the vaccine, people who are skeptical about the vaccine, and people who will not take the vaccine, no matter who tell them, even if God tell them. Right? So, what are you asking of the government?
We're asking of the government to rescind that mandatory order, not just for minibuses, but that mandatory requirement where you have to, making it mandatory. That is what we're going against, because it's not just about minibus. Many other persons in different sectors, you're putting them in a position where they must do this thing, even though you're not saying it directly, because they're coining their words quite smartly. But we want our workers, whether minibus persons or others, to go about their business and have that freedom of choice whether they want to take that vaccine or not.
No, but your minibus drivers are serving a public, and that
Yeah.
public includes people who are afraid of the virus, of catching the virus, and of taking the vaccine. You're not just serving people who are anti-vaccine. As minibus owners, you're serving the entire public. But you seem to be concentrating on just those who have not taken the vaccine or don't want to take the vaccine. What about those people who have to ride the minibuses that are afraid of catching COVID 19? Have you taken them into consideration?
Yeah, but they have not identified those commuters as persons to take the vaccine. They're saying that the bus drivers and conductors must take this vaccine, but they have not included the commuters at all. So you're saying to us that, all right, the bus drivers and conductors must take this vaccine. So what about the commuters who would be in that bus? Well, they're following the mask and the COVID protocols.
Uh,
Why single out bus drivers and conductors?
right. I mean, and that's the point. If you're going to have mandates, it should be for everybody. It can't be
But
just for the oh, what So, what are you asking the government to do? You say to rescind it. Well, if they rescind it, can we not show that picture? Um, if you're asking the government to rescind the order, then what are you suggesting they put in place that responds to the security of all citizens?
I think that we were doing quite well with the COVID protocols. Is the enforcement of persons who conforming to that protocol is where they would have fallen down. Because the minibus union had said, can you allow two in a seat, but our workers will lose money, but we want the government to do their part by reducing the cost of fuel, reducing other costs, operational costs, because we are initially decided that we are going to carry two in a seat. So they
All
have to
right.
do their part. But the businessmen don't want to let anything go down.
All right. So you're proposing, look, don't force us to take this vaccine. Here is what we are proposing as the next step that should meet the concerns of everybody. We are going to reduce the number of people in the buses to two in a seat. You're
Mhm.
asking for what reduction in the fuel costs to make up for what
Mhm.
you're losing with the commuters, the less than normal among number of commuters. Am I getting
Yeah,
you clear there?
quite right.
All right.
Correct.
And what has been the government? Have you formally put that on the table? Have you met with any government official? Have you met with the task force?
I'll be honest with you, sir. There was a task force. We don't even know who are the members of this task force. And if there are persons out there, stakeholders out there, I think it's the onus of this government to engage those stakeholders. We would like to talk with you because this is what we plan to do. We like to be a part of that decision making process because we're all involved and we all could be consumed.
But the government has not. So you're saying you have not met with anybody from the task force, anybody from the government?
No, sir, nobody.
Have you tried to get an
No,
audience with them?
we have to take some fault to the fact that we may not have tried. But then again, these decisions are made at such short notice. Today you see something, then tomorrow you see something else in the papers. But I think we may have to. But then again, their behavior clearly indicates that, they have made decisions and that is it. This kind of draconian way of doing things, we cannot live with that.
Yeah, point well taken. But do you agree that you ought to, as a union, try to meet with the authorities to put your demands on the table?
Yeah, we'll endeavor to do that in short time, in a
In
short
short
while.
time. In the short while. Now, do you agree that on the task force there should be representation from the opposition and from civil society organizations like yours?
Yes, sir. That is
You,
one of our major concerns. And we've said it over and over again that what is this task for? Why are major stakeholders not there? Because transportation is one of the things that could carry this virus as quickly and widely as possible.
yes, yes, yes. And so it is very important that people who represent the transportation industry be on that task force.
Yes, sir.
And is that
We
something
ought to
that you're
be,
going to?
and the opposition, everybody should be on because it's a national issue. It's not a political issue. In fact,
Right.
it's an international issue.
Yes, yes, yes. I completely agree with you. Now tell me something about the protests that you have been having. Where have these protests been taking place and how often?
I'm not hearing you clearly there, sir. You've gone down a bit.
No, I'm asking where the protests have been taking place.
Where protests, say again?
Where have the protests been taking place? The minibus protest?
Well, it has been taking place all the time up to now on the tarmac. That's the Square of the Revolution. But then again, you've also set a deadline. I think it's Monday.
Ah,
So you're saying to us, we set a deadline, and when this deadline reaches, you will see what we will do. That's what we understand it to be. So we will have to insulate ourselves again that by the forms of protest, we may even escalate it if it comes to that, but we will have to insulate ourselves against this bullyism.
yeah. What has been the response of the minibus drivers to the protest?
Um, there'll always be those who are brave enough to be physically a part of the thing. There'll be those who will be watching to see how it develops, how it escalates, and if they should join. They're followers. Then there's some who feel that, why this is not a job then. This is a hustle, and I gotta go out there and hustle me all the time. But then if you have yourself, if they treat us right, you can always see what you're doing as a job instead
Yeah,
of a hustle.
yes, yeah, but you appreciate the dilemma, yeah? You
Yes,
appreciate
yeah, I
the
do.
dilemma in the sense that some people depend on running their minibuses to feed their family on a day-to-day basis, and they have to wear that in mind, don't you think?
Dr. Hines, I understand that, but I think that some of the persons who might be contributing to this in the minibus service provider sector might be those owners, yeah? They're persons working with them. There's a pandemic and they don't care. Just what they had before, they must have now. They are not prepared to scale back something to help those persons that work with them. So they put them in a desperate situation.
Uh-huh. So there is a distinction there between the minibus owners and the minibus
Yeah,
operators, the
yes,
drivers and the
of course.
conductors, etc., etc.
Mhm.
How do you intend to deal with that as the union?
Um, I'll be honest with you, is that we have over a period of time, with the help of the a department in the Ministry of Tourism, trying to identify these owners, invite them to training so that we can talk with them. But it's not easy. Some of them you cannot find them unless you probably get some help from the um, income tax department. Because what you find is that persons bring 8 or 9 buses and they just throw them to anybody out there. So somewhere along the line, that's why I'm saying that with the task force, we would be able to quickly identify those owners that may have large fleets at least and get them on board.
The drivers are not willing to tell you who the owners are.
Uh, no, I'm not hearing you clearly, but I want to feel that what you just asked me is if we don't know where those owners are.
No, whether the drivers, the minibus
Uh-huh.
drivers, are they not telling you all who the owners are?
Not all of them. They ain't talking at all. These are so they ain't talking because they feel that if there's any connection to owners, it decreases their relationship or their relationship with the owners. So they're not talking. And they
Yeah,
want to break the law, they want to hot plate, they want to do all kind of things.
yeah, yeah. You certainly have quite a complex situation on your hand, because as you've pointed out, you have this situation that you're a union and you have to represent all shades of opinion among your membership. You have to fight back against government bullying you,
Yes.
whether you take the vaccine, you don't take the vaccine. Bullying is not something that we should even contemplate, much less agree on. And then you have the dilemma of people depending on the monies that they earn on a daily basis to feed their families. So you
Yeah.
have quite a task on your hand. Have you tried to call a general membership meeting of the union members to discuss this issue?
You're quite correct, sir. It all boils down or go back to the government, what they're prepared to do to alleviate the situation as it relates to COVID, and also think about the welfare of those service providers who provide transportation that the government hasn't been providing for years to come. So these persons would have made sacrifices. They would have faced the dealers. They've gotten nothing. This is the time in a pandemic when you can actually develop that relationship with the service providers.
Yes. Well, Mr. Andrews, we will keep monitoring your activities, and as the situation develops, the 2 weeks ends next week, right? The 2 weeks reprieve that they gave, it ends next week.
I hear you, sir.
I'm
I
I'm
hear you.
ask, I'm asking whether the 2 weeks reprieve that the government gave, that it's ending next week.
Um, we are not that reprieve, as they say. I think there's just talks because if the next 2 weeks, that as we said, that mandatory thing is not withdrawn, we will not give up. We are going to keep fighting, and I don't want people to feel that buses are strike. Buses are not strike. They're private owners, private operators, which means they can, if they wish, withdraw these services, to highlight something that is affecting them. And that's what
Right.
it is.
That's what you're doing. It's not a general strike.
No.
Right. All right. Mr. Ian Andrews, president of the Guyana Minibus Union, updating us on the situation regarding the minibus operators vis-a-vis the government mandate that all minibus drivers and conductors be vaccinated. Mr. Andrews, thanks for coming on, and I will have you back on as the situation develops. Thank you.
Quickly before you leave, sir,
Yes.
I want to make this clear that the minibus union and these service providers are the administration's friends. But if they want to make us their enemy, that is in their code. But we're their friends.
Okay. Point well taken. Thank you very much,
Okay.
Mr. Andrews. And we're going to take a short break. And when we come back, we will talk to two organizers of the Buxton protest this past weekend.
Okay. All right. Thank you, sir. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Please help keep Politics 101 on social media and broadcast television. If you are in North America, please donate via Cash App or PayPal.
If you are in Guyana and the Caribbean and don't have access to Cash App and PayPal, email your pledge to dhines6106@aol.com and we will direct you how to get your donation to us. Thank you in advance for your donation. Welcome back to Politics 101. In case you're just joining us, we're talking about the protest activities over the last couple of weeks. We just had on the first part of the program, Mr. Ian Andrews, who is the president of the Minibus Association, talking about the government mandates to minibus operators vis-a-vis the vaccine. This past weekend in Buxton, a group of organizations held a third protest, 3 weekends in succession. The first one was held in Buxton, then the second one in Victoria. And then this Sunday, they went back to Buxton again and held a protest activity. Two of the chief organizers of the protest activity are Kidaki Amsterdam and Dion Abrams. They're both members of the WPA. Kidaki is the host of Buxtonian Morning Time on CAMS TV. And Dion Abrams is the host of Walter Rodney Groundings on Channel 9 on Sunday evenings. Gentlemen, welcome to Politics 101.
Good evening to you, Dr. Hines, and thank you for having me.
Good evening to all the viewers across the world. It's a pleasure being here.
Kidaki, let me start with you. What are the objectives of these protest demonstrations? What are you protesting against, and what demands are you making?
Well, in short, Dr. Hines, there are lots of things to protest against. I've said from August to last year that every day there's a reason for protest in this country. All the excesses of the installed government are worth protesting. Hundreds of public servants dismissed without valid reasons, discriminatory practices in terms of hiring and distribution of relief, such as the COVID relief. Um, and recently, the mandatory vaccines. Those are some of the things which are worth protesting. Um, and those are some of the things which these protests were intended to highlight.
Racism?
Certainly racism. Well, when I say discriminatory practices, they take into consideration the racist behavior of the current administration.
Dion Abrams, let me bring you in. Because for the first year of the government being in office, we saw very little public protests. And then we've seen since the beginning of August a protest by your group or groups there on the East Coast. What prompted you all to go public with these demonstrations?
Well, Kiraki was on point when he mentioned some of the issues that are concerning to people. But I think people are becoming more and more concerned with the fact that the government is, in every sense of the word, discriminatory, that the policies that they're meting out are certainly favoring one set of people. And the other factor is that they are obviously seeking to entrench themselves upon the nation, and they are beating down upon Black people in every sense of the word, and treating us as though we are second-class citizens. But primary to that, apart from the racist nature of the administration, we have to understand that in every part of the world, that where resources of a country are available, that when people are excluded from participating in the distribution and management of those resources, that there is dissatisfaction all across Africa and so on, in the Middle East and so on. And the fight for resources has been one that would have engendered major conflicts. But this administration seems not to understand that despite the mouthing of things like multiracial politics and caring for everybody, what they've been doing in every sense of the word is clearly an attempt at control, at relegating us to people of third and fourth class, and of basically being reactionary to things like our protests. So when I say reactionary, the protest in the United States and the protest in Buxton would have seen them shouting out the next day that they're going to be giving out $25,000 to pensioners, making every time something happens, it is only then that they respond. But for 2 years, the public service has been bereft of an increase in a time when you see prices spiraling out of control, that people's ability to survive in this country is basically being taken from under their feet. And they are not responding to that. What they are responding to is Gaisuku, where they have essentially forced all of the African Guyanese out and are seeking to plunge money into something that is basically deadbeat, and giving resources to an agency that will channel it to one particular set of people. And it is the same thing with oil, all right? And we have to be dissatisfied that we cannot continue to. Land is another matter. In response to my comment that at the Sunday's rally, that, this is a matter of war. And when we say war has different facets to it. You can have total war, you can have a cold war, you can have an economic war, which is what they're waging. They have launched a war upon us. And I'm saying that we cannot sit back and take it. that war and violence will beget violence and war. And so they've put an Afro-Guyanese woman on Facebook saying that, oh God, I got a piece of land, I've been waiting for so many years and all of these things. And they're using that to say, we are waging a propaganda. One person they're using as evidence that they're not discriminatory. You know, if you look at the total picture, you get something that is totally different. And that is what people must be sensitive to, that this kind of, you can't use in a pool, a country with over 700,000 people, one voice to say that I'm using this person as a representation of us not being discriminatory. And that is the tactic. But you go to all the housing schemes, the PPP has been in power for over 23 years. And you go to all of the major housing schemes, and you will see the discrimination in the distribution of house lots. In many of these communities, after they would have given all the Indian people, the majority of them, then they pack in 2 or 3 or 4 Indian Afro-Guyanese families. You understand? Which makes them basically out of sorts in a sense, in a community that is basically not looking like them. If they really want to integrate the society, then they're going to make the communities look different and reflect what Guyana represents. But they're not doing that.
They're not doing that. Let me get Kidaki back in here. Kidaki, what has been the response to the 3 demonstrations that you have had on the East Coast?
When you say response, are we talking
what
about
has been the response of the people to the call to come out?
The response of the people certainly has been heartening. We continue to see what I consider growing numbers and varying numbers. When I say varying, in that the folks who are turning up for these protests are not coming from one locality. Despite the fact the protests are being held in Buxton, people are coming from all over the country.
And Victoria. One was held in Victoria.
Buxton and Victoria. People have come from all over. And it says, therefore, that the issues which we are highlighting are issues across the country. They're broad-based issues. They're not issues indigenous to Buxton. They're issues that most likely exist all over the place. And so, like Dion pointed out, that using Sister Perry to talk about not being discriminatory, the government waging that campaign with her photograph and so on and the video presentation to say they're not discriminatory is foolishness. Is the lowest of low, if I can call it that. And it shows that the current administration basically doesn't have any answer to what the people are highlighting as the issues, right? And so they go to attacking the messenger instead of dealing with the issues. And that is what they've been. On my program this morning, Rhonda Lane said when she went home from yesterday's protest, her neighbor said he had something to show her. And he sent her a photograph with Bar Jaglio and her 2 daughters, taken in 2018, I think. And I think News Source published that photograph because they recognized Rhonda Lane as one of the voices on the several programs and on the protest line. And so again, they're trying to intimidate her like they have done with Miss Perry. And in short, we can see this as a new strategy coming from the belly of the beast, if I can call it that, to intimidate people and try to stop them from highlighting these issues, the divisiveness, the racism, the discrimination, and the partial distribution of resources.
Let's get back to the protest. What have you learned? What have you learned politically from the 3 protests that you have had thus far?
Well, listen, there were several lessons. I think the one that I keep mulling is that people are so fed up with what is happening in this country in terms of governance, that they are calling on quote unquote national leaders to take more condign action against the actions of the administration currently. I think that's resounding.
Dion Abrams, let me bring you in. What lessons politically have you learned in addition to what Kedaki just said from the 3 demonstrations thus far?
You know, one of the things, let me say this, David, you were out there at Buxton the last protest, and we noticed that the attempt at driving fear in people is one that seems to have started. While we were there, a young Guyanese policeman turned up with a submachine gun, right, slung around his waist, and was walking gallantly along the protest line and so on. So I had to confront him. I said, we don't want any guns here. We are a peaceful protest and so on. We spoke to I think it was an inspector who was there, an Indian guy, and he was very amenable to the fact that, this is antagonism. And so he went and he spoke to the youngster, and that came off. But it tells me that, they are not beyond going back to a time where they use the police force to brutalize people. And the protest, in essence, is saying that there are lots of concerns. I mean, when we were on the picket line, people used that opportunity to bring out a whole plethora of messages that were issues confronting them in this country. The church came out, the Rastafarian community came out. I mean, everybody came to represent their issue on that picket line. And so people have a lot of grievances, and these grievances need to be addressed. But the PPP is not about addressing them. They're not concerned about that. They have an agenda that they have set, and that agenda is the Elections Commission and putting people there to control the election machinery, to rig again. They have an agenda to keep the public servants poor, who are in the main teachers, nurses, and so on, who are in the main Afro-Guyanese. All right, they have an agenda to distribute the resources of the country to the rich. They're giving them all kinds of benefits and so on. And they have an agenda to basically drive fear into people.
Right? What have you been hearing on the picket line, Dion? What have you been hearing on the picket line as it relates to leadership on the opposition side, as far as representing the people's concerns?
Well, that is a big issue because people somehow feel that a lot of the persons, maybe not all of them, but they have a sense that a lot more representation is needed because they're not seeing the so-called leaders. Since we've had these protests, we have to be thankful that some of the parliamentarians came out and made their presence felt, but those who are the leaders per se, who have claim to be leaders, are not in any sense presenting themselves and showing any signs of giving the representation to the people that they're supposed to be representing. And that is, it's regrettable, it's disgraceful, it's shameful, and people are upset about it. All right. The other thing
yes, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, Dion.
All right. The other thing is people do not want to be dictated. All right. In the COVID situation, people believe that they must have a choice to take the vaccine or not, which is reasonable, I believe. I think the government is following a world agenda without consideration for proper tactics and in dealing with the situation. They have to be more tactical in trying to convince people if they want them to take the vaccine. In doing so, you can't bully people into it. Once you bully people, then there is going to be a response. The simple laws of physics, nature tell you that to every action there is an equal and opposite reaction, and people are going to resist. What they have to do is to try to get people to conform in some way, but their handling of the situation in itself is not one that is going to bring that conformity, right? And that too is a concern, right? Because people are still receiving mixed messages about COVID and all of these things. So that's it.
Yes. Right. And I'm very glad you raised the question of the broad-based nature of the demonstrations, because in some parts of the media, they've been trying to pigeonhole the demonstration as an anti-vaccine demonstration. And while the concerns about the vaccine, the concerns about the government bullying have found their place on the picket, the picket line and the demonstrations. Certainly, it's a broad-based menu of concerns that people have. And I'm very glad you highlighted that. Let me get Kedaki in here. Kedaki, what has been the response to this form of grassroots organization that does not necessarily start with the formal opposition? You have to unmute.
Yes, listen, the response, like I said earlier, has been heartening. People have been turning out, and they've been basically showing what I've been arguing all the time. If the quote-unquote national leaders fail to lead, grassroots leaders will arise and lead, and people will follow those who believe have their interests at heart. And so that is what you've been seeing. People have been turning out. People have been responding to the call for protests by people who, those of us who quote unquote are not in the formal opposition camp, if I can call it that. Right? And while they're there, they certainly have been decrying the absence or the invisibility of those who are in the formal opposition camp. Like Dion said, there have been a couple of parliamentarians who came around. In the first week, I think Sherrod and Christopher were present. When we went to Victoria, I am not sure I saw any parliamentarian.
There was no parliamentarian there.
No parliamentarian was there.
But then Ferguson came on Sunday.
Right. And so people are recognizing the absence. And what people are saying basically is in this era, in this time, what they want to see is the presence of all the political representatives showing togetherness, a singleness of heart in confronting what currently is the PPP dictatorship.
Do you plan to continue these demonstrations in the coming weeks?
Certainly, these demonstrations will continue. There is a necessity to continue them. It is just the shape and form that perhaps might change to some extent. The location also might change from Buxton, because Buxton has been the epicenter, if I can call it that, for these protests.
But there will be 3 protests, and 2 were held in Buxton, but 1 in Victoria. And so we want to, why not say East Coast?
Right, no? East Coast. Right. So these protests were being held on the East Coast. And so the idea is that the possibility is going forward, we're going to change the location of these protests, because, like I said, these issues spread across the country. And
so you plan to go to other villages on the East Coast? That's what you're saying?
Yes, certainly. We plan to go to other. As a matter of fact, let me put the people at Pleasance and BV on alert, because I've received requests from folks in BV. They have lots of issues which they're troubled by and which they would like to highlight. Likewise, the people at Pleasance and so on. But on the west side also, I envisage that we are going to be hosting protests on the west side, because I've been in contact with people on the west side, some of whom actually came to our protest in Buxton and Victoria and so on, and they would like to see similar actions on the west side because they have issues too.
Have you seen any direct results of these protests there on the East Coast? Go ahead, tell us about some. Yeah.
Certainly. Let me start. You know, as I said, the little things matter. And a lot of people might just believe that we are there protesting silently and nobody is paying attention. But let me point out for the fact how we know that they're paying attention. And we're getting some of the quiet demands, if you want to call it that, responded to. In the first protest in Buxton, the Friday, I think, before we hosted that protest, I hosted some community health workers on my Buxtonian morning time. And they raised with me an issue that is plaguing them. Since December last year, they were paid. They have not been paid for the year. And this is by the Region 4 administration and by extension, the government. Because part of the thing which is being highlighted by them is that the Region 4 administration is telling them that they're waiting on PSM for contracts, etc., to pay them. So they highlighted that issue. They came on the protest line. They further highlighted the issue. And I received the information that I think the Monday or Tuesday, they were called to the PSM, invited to PSM to sign contracts. They were told that it's a one-year contract. It is going to expire in next year. And they're going to be paid what they're due sometime soon. Right? So that for me is a direct result of protest action. Otherwise, they would not have gotten thus far. Again, we have seen the announcements, because one of the things we highlighted was the fact that Gaisuko was getting constant monies from the government. Every 2 morning, billions are apportioned to Gaisuko, but the public servants were getting nothing. I think it was also after that first protest that the PPP announced that public servants were going to get an increase in wages and salary sometime soon or by the end of the year, something to that extent. Also, let me go quickly, because I know time is against us, to Saturday. When we announced the protest to Sunday, as I like to say, the PPP and their entire generations came to Buxton on Saturday. They came to Buxton, they went to the ball ground. As a matter of fact, even before coming to Buxton, because one of the things which I highlighted previously and was also highlighted on the protest was the fact that they spent millions or large sums to say they're fixing fence at the ball ground, but they paid no attention to the road, which was in a was and still is in a deplorable state, despite the fact that the water treatment plant is housed on the road, the National Library Annex is housed on the road, the only secondary school in Buxton is housed on the road. They eventually graded that road shortly after the protest.
Well, then, while the protest was going on, the grading was happening. No?
No, I'm talking about Friendship here.
Oh, okay.
I'm talking about Friendship. So they came Saturday morning and they went right back to the ball ground at Friendship and made a big fuss about donating 8 concrete posts on which they will eventually put lights for lighting the ground. Again, that's a direct, I believe it's a direct effort to try to mitigate what we were doing on the protest line. Because while they were doing that also, perhaps for the first time in my adult life, I've seen contractors started repairing a road on a Saturday morning. While they were doing that on Saturday, a contractor turned up at the Buxton Milwaukee Road, starting from the line side, and started started marking the road. And I asked one of them, what y'all doing, patching the road? He said, no, we're doing it over. And so they started digging up the road. And I want to emphasize on this, because they were working with some amount of efficiency and urgency. While HIMAC was digging, a roller was rolling. And men were doing whatever else they had to do. So that started Saturday morning and continued into Saturday afternoon, and even Sunday while we were protesting, they were busy continuing work on that piece of road up until Sunday evening. Let me draw to the public's attention that after the protest concluded on Sunday, I've seen no other work done on the Buxton Minibus Road. No other work. Yesterday, I think I saw 2 trucks. I suspected them to be sand trucks or something. But I've seen nothing else done on that Minibus Road from then to now.
Yeah, but the point you're making is that they are responding to the pressures of the protest, even if they're doing so at their own pace. The point here is that the protests are having direct effects, because one of the things we have been stressing on the protests is that we're not just trying to get rid of the government at the next election. We're trying to get relief today, now, to people. So it's a different kind of protest, not just the protest where you go out and you make noise and you don't make demands. We are making demands for relief to people now. And the fact that they have begun to do those roads in that village is as a result of the action that the people on that picket line are taking. And we have to say that loud and clear. And we have to congratulate those people on the protest for coming out there and causing the government to act. One of the things protesters have to do is to own it. And as leaders, we have to sound the bell loud when we see these things. So that I noticed they say that Ramson came and walked to Buxton. Well, we in Buxton are not vultures. We are not going to eat Mr. Ramson. He's free to come and walk. But when he finished walking, we walked the next day. We were on the picket line the next day, and we were saying that we need relief now. John Abrams, you have the last word on this segment.
Dr. Hines, before, sorry, I want to point out that the responses have been both positive and negative, because the fixing of things, albeit slowly and so on, is the positive. The negative is the way they treated Ms. Perry. And that negative response is aimed at intimidating those who intend to protest, those who intend to join the protest. And so they want to perhaps weaken the protest line. And I'm calling on all and sundry, do not be intimidated by this government. The fact that they have to go so low means that we have them right where they're supposed to be.
All right. Dion, the last word.
Yeah, the other thing too is that people should not be fooled. The message is that unless you demonstrate that you're not going to accept anything short of what you should be receiving, and you do so in a forceful way, that you're not going to get from the government what is due to you. And that's a bad thing. It's really not nice for any government that people have to come out to protest and picket to get things. The teachers, the nurses, the other public servants, we have to protest. We have to make people understand that everybody has to come out. All right?
Yeah.
That we all have to share this pie, and we have to share it in a way that is inequitable. You can't be doling out a whole lot of money to business people and leaving poor people in the doldrums, allowing them to suffer. I heard former finance minister Jordan saying that people's basket of goods have practically been reduced by half or less than half.
Since
2019 and so on. Because the spending power of people have reduced so significantly with the rising prices. And
Dion, we have to go because we have Rickford Brock and Aubrey Norton coming on to talk about the protests in New York. But you're right. People should not have to protest for government to do things. But Frederick Douglass said, since in the 19th century, power concedes nothing without demand. Right? But thanks to you and Kedaki for coming on, and we'll keep monitoring those protests on the East Coast. We'll take a short break, and then Rickford Burke and Aubrey Norton will be on.
Please help keep Politics 101 on social media and broadcast television. If you are in North America, please donate via Cash App or PayPal.
If you are in Guyana and the Caribbean and don't have access to Cash App and PayPal, email your pledge to dhines6106@aol.com and we will direct you how to get your donation to us. Thank you in advance for your donation.
And welcome back to Politics 101. Who do we have? Is Mr. Norton there? Mr. Burke there?
Yes, I'm here. I can guarantee you that. I can't tell you if Mr. Burke is there.
You look
tired.
Tired.
I've been up since 4 this morning, traveled to Washington, and I've been going ever since then. So I'm looking for some sleep.
Okay. You were at that protest in New York there on Sunday. You spoke at that event, and immediately after the event, others spoke, including Congressman Hakeem Jeffries. And immediately after that protest, the PPP went on the back foot because it seems as though you all hit them in the soft spot. You know, they've gotten away with this fact that they're not racist. They are a government that governs on behalf of everybody. But it seems as though the story of their racism has now gone international. And they hit back. Well, not hit back, they start to cry. What do you think?
Well, first of all, let me say thanks to Rickford Burke and Company who organized the protests and other activities. It wasn't only protests. We had meetings in which we sensitized the public here and key people in positions of power as to the realities in Guyana. One of the first things we did was to point out that the government has this tendency to talk about one Guyana and call on them to judge from the government's actions. And we underscore the actions that were racist in nature, how they dealt with African Guyanese in land, how they dealt with COVID resources. We pointed out that they discriminate against regions and communities that are AP and UAFC stronghold. And so we lay out the facts. And they were and are in no position to refute the facts, because facts are facts. And so I think they're at a point where now they recognize that even with their powerful PR machine that spreads lies, people were meeting with stakeholders and speaking to them. In fact, today I came to Washington, D.C., and I met the Haitian ambassador and sought to explain exactly what is happening to the Haitian population in Ghana because they are of African descent. I believe that the entire process has impacted in a number of ways. First, it has raised consciousness of the Guyanese in the diaspora. Second, I think it has managed to wake up Guyanese at home. It has managed to put some of the persons active in the struggle in focus here. And I believe all of those came together to cause the PPP to worry, because their actions are now being exposed and further action is being taken to ensure that it is acted upon and that the PPP is brought to account. We pointed out, for instance, about the discrimination in flood relief. Now, you're talking about flood relief. When you talk about households, you're paying by households, etc. And then suddenly, when you came to agriculture, you start paying by the acre. Now, once you start to pay by the acre, if you're paying 400,000 an acre, it means the people with 1,000 acres are doing well. It means the people with 1 or 2 acres will get little or no money, the small man, and therefore might very well be in their problem. So we were able to highlight a lot of the things that they're doing that are discriminatory in nature. And we believe it has impacted them because they also sought to take every house slave they have amidst them and put them to respond. I think it was an affront to ask Mark Phillips, who really doesn't wield power in the PPP, to respond. And when he responds, clearly he is on no proper ground to respond, because he knows full well that the reality is that they discriminate against our people.
Far on this point, you know a lot about protests since you have been organizing these things since you were in short pants. Sometimes when you're not on the protest, you don't get a feel for the energy. Give us a sense of the energy on that protest. I noticed Rick Bork has joined us, but give us a sense of the energy on the ground there on Sunday.
Well, from the beginning, there was energy. People started to come out early. In fact, my understanding is that some people came so early. And don't forget, one of the things we must recognize, it was extremely hot.
Yes, that time of year.
And many people sat, waited for hours. And so, there is an interest. When it comes to the actual march, there was a kind of a new pride in Guyanese. There was a fervor that emerged. There was a sense of togetherness. And what was manifest is the willingness of our supporters to come out, be in support, and even suggest that they will take it outside of New York so that it can impact all across the United States. And so I think it was indeed a special occasion. You felt the real solidarity of people with the African Guyanese community and the Indo and indigenous communities that are discriminated by the PPP on political grounds. And so I think it has increased the anxiety of people to take on the regime and to ensure that they are held accountable. I think it provided information to persons who might not have been able to access information unless there was that activity. And so for me, it was a great success. It was a manifestation that Guyanese are willing to work together. It's a manifestation that Guyanese are prepared to take on the People's Progressive Party. And it's also a manifestation that the international community is learning the reality on the ground. Let us not forget the People's Progressive Party spread a lot of lies in the diaspora. From day one, the coalition came to government. They were active undermining and misinforming. And I think it has done a lot to bring the ship back on even keel. So I think it was positive. I think it will redound to the benefit of Guyana. And I think it is another step in the process of getting rid of the People's Progressive Party, which has shown that it is corrupt, incompetent, and divisive.
Rickford Buck, let me bring you in. Rickford, are you there with us? Yes, here he is. Rickford, do you feel that the event met your expectations?
Well, of course, we had over 2,000 people on the march, and based on the police estimation, we had over 10,000 people at the rally. And Bobby said that is very good in a pandemic and in 106-degree weather. The diaspora is energized. People feel that there was some sort of undercurrent in the diaspora that needed to be awoken. And the same thing on the ground in Guyana. I've gotten so many messages from people from the Lukanoni to the quarantine, from London to West Coast to East Coast, to all over the country, who expressed to us that they have been inspired, that they have a renewed hope that things will get done. And we hope that the people in Guyana, the people from Buxton and Belgium and Amstel and Bewillam and Will and Hope and then more, and all these people across the country who feel discriminated against, that they will come out and demonstrate, use their constitutional rights to demonstrate and express to the government how they feel. People were fearful that the police would shoot them and oppress them when they demonstrate their feelings against government. We have been assured by our members of Congress, and we'll be meeting with the White House and the State Department shortly, that they will not tolerate that. And our members of Congress are prepared to say to the Guyanese people, if you abuse people, we will institute sanctions against Guyana Police Force. I know that there are a lot of security programs or justice enhancement program or security infrastructure program that the United States is helping to enhance. All of those will be sanctioned if the Guyana Police Force abuses citizens to express their democratic rights and shoot people with tear gas and all of that. But all in all, it was a very successful event. As always said, Guyanese had a renewed sense of pride. People felt that somebody's listening to them. Even though we did not show it, the elected officials from Guyana met with several elected officials, the majority leader of the State Council, Assemblywoman Diana Richardson, Congresswoman Yvette Clark, Congressman Hakeem Jeffries, Senator Kevin Parker, and a few Democratic strategists also spoke to them and met with them. So And this is not the first. We continue to have these engagements. Obviously, you know, this was successful because of the lack of the PP government, from the Prime Minister, to Jack Dale to Urban Ali, where Jack Dale is now holding up a sign in Texas, waving, any black congressman, please come by me and let me take a picture. He is paying lobbyists now to take a photograph with black members of Congress. But this stuff behind this is what is important. We're not interested in photo op. We're not interested in Trumpism. We're interested in equitable governance. We want to see racial justice. We want to see a level playing field. We want to see the wealth gap narrow. We want to see equal opportunity for all Guyanese. That's what this is about. And it is not just about Barja. They're taking a photograph of a black person to say that he's not racist. It is the racist policies and practices of the government that we are opposed to and that we're rallying against and that we will continue to fight until there's equity and fairness and justice in the Guyanese society.
I think a number of people in the audience are saying your video needs to be adjusted. They seem not to be hearing clearly. If you can do that while I bring in Aubrey again. Aubrey?
Yes.
Why the frenzy over the statements made by Hakeem Jeffrey?
Well, because first of all, I think it made clear to the world, one, that the establishment in the United States is now aware of what is happening in Guyana. I think the second reason that there is a frenzy is because he's powerful, and it is well known that he's likely the next majority speaker at the House. I think also the fact that he dealt directly with this question of racism and suggested that America will not sit idly by while racism is practiced in Guyana. I believe those things have caused them to recognize that they can no longer did what they did in the last 23 years when they governed and get away with it. I think they also have been brought to the reality that anything you do now will be exposed because of social media and access to the internet. Now, one of the things the PPP specializes in is telling a lie and then go into their campaign machinery and use it to cover the lie. These processes are uncovering the lies. And so I think they are on their back foot. And I think what is most worrying for them is when Hakeem Jeffries said what he said, they cannot come with facts to say it is a lie, because we have identified the facts, we have put it out there, and all they come in with is platitudes saying that people are misinforming, etc. But they are not challenging the points we made at one. You said that once you regain power, you will take away lands from anybody who got it under the AP and UAFC, and you only end up taking from African Guyanese. They can't challenge the fact that they distribute COVID, and in their support base, they give people regardless of whether they had ID or not. But in African Guyanese communities, they were asking all kind of questions, leaving a pink slip and depriving people of that kind of assistance. So I believe as the facts, they cannot doubt that they're starving the city council of resources and seeking to destroy the mayor and city council. They cannot doubt that in region 10, 7, and 4, the regions that were won by the AP and UAFC, they are stifling them of resources. And so the facts are in their faces. Not only are the facts on the internet, but you had direct contact with people in the American establishment. And I have begun a process today of meeting Caribbean ambassadors and talking and let them know what is happening, because many of them end up taking positions without the requisite information. And in essence, we are now saying to them directly, this is what is happening in Guyana, and urging them to action. And so I believe all of that, it has the PPP on the back foot. I don't think they know what to do. It is, and that is compounded with the situation in Guyana where there is increased cost of living. Even PPP supporters are crying out about increased cost of living. Evident corruption. Look, we used to announce every oil lift, who it's going to, how much come in. They have stopped that. And there is information emerging that they are into corrupt deals.
Yeah.
And probably deals with people who are part of the underworld rather than the business world that is above board. So one sees that the narrative has been debunked, and the reality of the situation in Guyana has come to the fore. And that, I think, is disturbing them. And when one thinks about that, at the same time, there is an increase in protests across Guyana. And with them suggesting mandatory vaccination, they themselves are creating the conditions for opposition. Now, so by their very actions, they are putting their own dictatorship on trial. And so I believe that the combination of those factors would have made the PPP vulnerable, weak, and it is not full-scale protests yet, and they're already on the back foot. I have long argued that the PPP cannot take people standing up to them, and it isn't going to be as easy for them to kill people as they did previously. So the dynamics of the world has changed. And then they no longer has a Republican Party in government in the United States that they can use their resources and finance companies and then have a blind eye turn to the atrocities they are performing. So they're really in a bad position. And I believe we have to work to intensify the struggle and to continue to point out that the solution to this problem lies in a new election with a new voters list. That and only that can give the government any form of legitimacy. And once an election is called, I believe we'll beat the PPP hands down.
A new voters list, and of course, an impartial machinery at GCOM. Rick Burke, have you fixed your audio? We'll know. Rick, you and others have pulled off this march and rally, and what's your plans going forward? You're not hearing me? Mr. Operator, Rickford is not hearing. Aubrey, let me bring you while we fix Rickford there. You're making the rounds, Aubrey Norton. I noticed you were in New Jersey. You're now in Washington, D.C. So quite apart from the march, you're doing other kinds of important work. What are you learning as you're making the rounds?
First of all, I know Rickford is back. First of all, I'm learning that our people in the diaspora are prepared to make the sacrifice, to give us the support, and to even come to Guyana to help. The second thing I am learning is that they want us to stay in constant contact with our constituencies, both at home and abroad. The third thing I have learned is that they want to see us turn up the heat on the PPP. They believe the more we do to expose, confront, and agitate against the PPP, it creates a better base for them to engage the international community. I also learned from the process that the PPP is not as strong as they appear to be, that 2 jabs and they go on like if, you know, you pelt an uppercut to the chin, that is devastating. And I learned as well that our people believe the regime should be confronted. Our people believe they are there by fraudulent votes. Our people believe they are installed. And our people are confident that once we take the right actions, once we organize ourselves, get that new voters list, deal with the election machinery, we are going to defeat the People's Progressive Party and be back in power in a short time. I also learned that a lot of them are speaking to their families in Guyana and encouraging them to join the resistance to this installed dictatorial PPP regime.
Rickford?
Yes,
are you hearing me now?
I'm hearing you.
Yes. What are some lessons that you have taken away from this activity?
Well, the first is that in unity there's strength and power. What we saw was a demonstration of unity between the diaspora and the homeland. People were inspired by that. And so I want to renew my call for unity at home. There should be unity within the coalition. There should be unity within all the parties of the coalition. That's important because it then gives our people hope. It gives our people inspiration. Second, it demonstrates clearly how weak the PPP is. We, as Aubrey said, we just had one rally here and they went into tailspin and started to pose with all sorts of Black people. And it's so insulting to me as a Black person. It's insulting to Black politicians that people who believe in apartheid governance, people who are racist to the core, like Barry Jagdeo, think that that's what we want. Think that we just want them to be around us to take a photograph. They have not, you had the mayor speaking to the Congress members, both members of Congress from Brooklyn, about how they're starving the municipality of Georgetown, the city of Georgetown, for funds. You had the regional chairman of Region 4. You had the regional vice chairman of Region 7. You had several members of parliament talking about how they're starving their people from the COVID relief funds, how they're depriving all communities that did not vote for the PPP from funds. Linden, one of the members of parliament, spoke about Linden. And they have the audacity to say people are misleading the members of Congress. And let me address that. The Republicans are advising the PPP. KKK Republicans are advising the PPP. And the PPP is going full blast with that advice. Not once has anybody from the PPP, Prime Minister, Minister of Foreign Affairs, anybody say, well, we want to meet with these MPs and these officials to talk to them about their complaints, because as far as we're concerned, we're not doing it. So we want to sit and talk to them. No, they want to punish them. We took away the mayor's security and then quickly put it back after we condemned it. They're attacking the regional vice chairman of region number 7. They're attacking the members of parliament. And then they're talking about they want to see Congressman Jeffries. There's going to be no meeting with Congressman Jeffries. We are going to advise him not to have a meeting. If they want to have a meeting with Congressman Jeffries, they must set the conditions on the ground for that. Don't run around to Sheila Jackson Lee and Congressman Al Green. And I'm going to write to those members of Congress and set Barry Jagdeo's record straight. Because
Rickford, what are the conditions for that you are going to ask Congressman Jeffries to demand before he meets with the PPP government?
Well, I don't think Congressman Jeffries is going to entertain any correspondence from them. But what we are going to say, because they've been very disrespectful, but what we are going to say is one, they have to make sure that they fund and resource the opposition leader's office, because the resources of the country, which should be allocated to the opposition leader, don't belong to the PPP. They're acting as though the treasury belongs to them and their ethnic supporters. Second, we want to see a level playing field with contracts. There must be equality in the way contracts from the government are awarded, both across ethnicities. We want to see them restoring finances to the city of Georgetown so that the people of Georgetown can benefit. We want to see them funding properly the regions that they did not win. Now imagine the people of Georgetown and the businesses in Georgetown and Region 4 generally pay the most taxes, but they are withholding the money from services, providing services to the people because the people did not vote for them. That must end immediately. And all of those lands and leases that they terminated and they're taking away from mostly Afro-Guyanese and some Amerindians and some East Indians who did not vote for them, restore it immediately. All of those trumped up charges that they're targeting politicians from the APNU, lawyers who worked on these contracts like James Bond, CEOs like former CEOs like Calvin Heath London and Trevor Benn, and all those deputy permanent secretaries and deputy permanent secretaries, Don Holder, Kush, all of these people who did nothing, they're professionals, and they're firing them, over 3,000 now, including Guywa workers who did nothing, but they fired them because they're Black and some of them are presumed to support the coalition. Up to today, I was talking to a contractor, a very young contractor who's African Guyanese, who said to me, he cannot get a contract. He can't get a contract because he is Black and presumed to support the PNC. Or even if he supports the PNC, so what? The resources of the country belong to the people of the country, not the PPP. And we have to cut that out. And Dr. Hines, I'm promising you and the people of Guyana, if the PPP continues with this apartheid policy, we would bring governance in Guyana to a screeching halt. We cannot afford to have an apartheid regime in Guyana, in the Western Hemisphere, in the Caribbean. No way, no how, we're not going to allow it to happen.
Yes, and of course, Rickford, you're quite on point there. You know the inviting of the parliamentarians in particular to the event did not sit well with everyone. And so let me ask you this. What was your objective when you invited the parliamentarians and all this stuff?
Well, first of all, we want to introduce the diaspora to the young members of parliament. But second, we feel that the young people should prepare themselves to leadership. And so we wanted to give them the exposure in the international community to demonstrate their leadership. And for those who don't support it, that's fine. Not everyone supports decisions that you make in politics and generally in life. But the fact is, we have to now migrate to a different generation of leaders. We cannot afford to have these leaders who are leaders from the 60s and the 70s with the same old worn-out policies. Those with policies who have failed us, failed the party, failed the coalition, to continue to be leaders. Give the young people a chance to lead. And they cannot lead if we don't give them the experience and give them the exposure. And that's why we did it. So we have no apologies to anybody for inviting these young members of parliament.
Mr. Buck, what do you hope that they take back to Guyana from the experience of taking part in the event?
Firstly, we hope they take back to Guyana the important facts and reality that in unity there's strength. And all of them need to go back to Guyana and stand united to confront the PPP. Second, exposure. Create opportunities to tell the story, to lay clear the discriminatory record, the racist record, the apartheid record of the PPP, and you take the message to the people. There's a solid message. When you compare the AP and UFC coalition governance with what we're seeing now, people are in crisis. Everyday cost of living is through the roof. People are feeling it. There are floods, but only one ethnicity getting relief. There's a COVID pandemic, but only one ethnicity getting the relief. Only one ethnicity getting billions of dollars in government contract. When you look at what is happening in the oil and gas industry, all these contracts, all these projects going to one set of people. Half the population is Afro-Guyanese. Then you have another sect that is Amerindians. What happened to them? The PPP is governing the country like if they're Donald Trump, and we should not accept it. So I want these young politicians, and by the way, they met with very, very good resource persons who train them, medicine, how to manage a constituency, how to organize your campaign, and whatever. They received really, really solid, good advice and training. So it was not just come up to New York to march and have a rally. We had a one-day conference where we sat with them and discussed issues affecting us here in the diaspora. We had training sessions. And then yesterday, or day before yesterday, we had a town hall meeting. So it was an overall very rounded trip. And they were able to see the holistic picture, how we perceive it from the diaspora. And so we're sending them back with good training, a message, and a solid strategy to confront the PPP.
Rickford, quickly, is this a one-off, or you are going to keep doing your thing?
Absolutely not. As we said in our press statement, this is the commencement of a series of activities to expose racism and apartheid governance in Guyana. Our next stop would be Washington. We're arranging a White House briefing. We're going to also brief members of Congress. We're going to have a rally and a march just like we did in New York, in Washington, D.C. And then we're going to take it to the international organizations, the OAS, the IDB, the World Bank, the United Nations, and on and on and on. We will not stop until the PPP changes its governance or until we change the government of the PPP in Guyana.
If people across North America, Guyanese across North America, want to volunteer and be part of these initiatives, is there a place, a central point that they can call, they can contact?
Oh, certainly. They can email us at Caribbean Institute at gmail.com, or they could go to the CGID Facebook page and send us a message, or they could also go to the GORE Facebook page, Guyanese Organizations Against Racism, and send us a message, and we will contact them.
All right, so you've got that information there. Those of you, Aubrey Norton, you have the last word.
Well, all I wanted to add to what Rickford said in terms of what we will ask for, I think, Rickford, we did agree that one of the conditions we will put is that regions that a party would have won must be involved in naming and appointing the RU, the town clerk, and the overseer, because one of the things the PPP does is to violate the Constitution, appoint people who they want, and get around the system. So I just wanted to say that. At this stage, all I would say is that I have a little more time here to do some work in the international community, but I'll be back home shortly to be able to be involved in the struggle to ensure change in Guyana and a change in government.
Thank you very much. Aubrey Norton, who, of course, is running for the leadership of the People's National Congress, the largest party in the coalition. Rickford Burke, who has been tirelessly working there in Brooklyn and New York in general to keep the pressure up. Thank you all for coming on to Politics 101.
Thanks, Gavin.
And of course, please come back. You all are no strangers. Earlier in the program, we had Mr. Ian Andrews, who is the chairman of the Guyana Minibus Union, and he was talking about the challenges that they're facing in trying to navigate the mandates that have been passed down by the government. And then we had Kedaki Amsterdam and Dion Abrams talking about the initiative, the protests that they have been having on the East Coast, in Victoria, in Buxton, and they talk about moving to other villages on the East Coast, Plaisance, they mentioned Bedford-Acton. So we are keeping the movement alive and building the movement because there is power in the movement. You know, they can pick us off if we're one individual, if we are one village, if we are one party, but if we come together at home and abroad and link our hearts and our minds together, then we are able to bring to bear maximum pressure on those who hold power and are being reckless about it. We are human beings too, those of us who did not support the government. We are God's children too. We are Guyanese too. Our foreparents helped to build that country too. And we have a right to survive in that country as equal citizens. We're not going to rest. We're not going to rest. We're not going to rest until justice is brought to bear. And those who are denied justice today gets justice tomorrow. And the biggest justice we can have is when Guyana is there for all of us. I love Martin Carter. I come from the nigger yard of yesterday, leaping from the oppressor's hate and the scorn of myself. I turn to the histories of men and the lives of the people and said, I come with scars on my shoulders. And I come from the nigger yard of yesterday, and to the world of tomorrow, I turn with my strength. There is strength in movement, and we got to build that strength. The sisters who are being attacked because they got a piece of land and the PPP is saying that they should be thankful. Look, you all got to build up strength. You will be attacked when you're in struggle. And you've got to be able to take the punches and dodge them and punch back. My man, Jimmy Cliff, long time ago, said it, the harder they come, the harder they fall. They punch you, dodge, and punch back. Don't be fearful because they identify you and so on. That's part of struggle. That's part of struggle. You're going to get some scars, but it's worth it. So, here we are, Politics 101 on a Thursday evening. It's so wonderful to have been talking to people who have decided to put their lives on the line to fight for all of us. And we've got to support them. You know, Mr. Nandalal has told the marshals who are visiting Guyana from the US that they must watch at these programs because we're causing trouble. You know? Well, we didn't have support, no? We lost the election, no? Huh? He was in New York the other day and saying, oh God, we're not giving them any opposition. It's a shame. It's a shame. They're begging we for opposition. And now you get opposition in your tail. You're complaining because you think we're fools. My auntie used to tell me, I'm not sending you to school to be a fool. So, once you're all with us, we're going to fight this fight and we're going to win this fight. Good night, right? Please remember, Politics 101 is here to be part of the struggle for justice and ultimate freedom. Good night. Bye.
Please help keep Politics 101 on social media and broadcast television. If you are in North America, please donate via Cash App or PayPal.
If you are in Guyana and the Caribbean and don't have access to Cash App and PayPal, email your pledge to dhines6106@aol.com and we will direct you how to get your donation to us. Thank you in advance for your donation.